right, welcome back, and it's time for us to review the dailies this morning, and I'll go straight to introducing the panel that we have here this morning. And I am joined by Vivian Tarr, who's a governance analyst. Thank you for joining us this morning. And also Joe Halende, who's a political strategist. Asante sana for joining us bright and early. And we'll go straight into the Standard, where the headline is Mystery of Missing 5 Million Primary School Pupils. And before one panics and wonders whether they went to school and went missing, that's not the case. The case here is that according to the records, from the time the government introduced the electronic registration system, there seems to have been an inflation of 5.2. I repeat that figure again, 5.2 million students who they cannot account for. Yet the government budgets for them. I'll start with you, Vivian. I know this is a figure that, first of all, also got you by surprise. She kept asking, are you sure it's 5 million or not 500?
My thoughts on this is I smell corruption written all over it. Either someone inflated some figures or something is just not right somewhere. There is no way we can be missing 5 million. It's too big a number for an error.
Well, to be fair to them, although the figure is still very high, Joe, they say that part of the reason why there may be that staggering difference is the fact that one of the requirements for registration is for birth certificates. And some of the students may not have birth certificates, but 5 million would still be a huge figure. We would expect maybe hundreds of thousands at the least, or even maybe thousands. But 5.2 million, a huge figure.
Actually, if the reason is that some of the people don't have a birth certificate, actually we should be having deficit of the pupils, not inflation. Not inflation. But generally, you can see there's a problem in the Ministry of Education. And the problem that affects the Ministry of Education is it's simply because of the leadership in that ministry. Since the time of Matiang'i, since 2013 up to today, we still have a problem with leadership in the Ministry of Education. Things are not
Professor
okay.
Magoha there now, and there are some who would argue that he has been in the education sector for long and is possibly doing his best to try and clean up.
Actually, Mike, being tough is not a sign of being a good leader. What is happening in the Ministry of Education is that things are being swept under the carpet, and it's a time bomb. There's a time which is about to approach where things will not work in the Ministry of Education, and it will be a problem to this country. And that's the only way we are going to kill this country.
All right, now according to government data, the number of pupils is 10 million, but 5.2 million have been captured in the electronic registration. But Vivian, of course, the good side of this is that now with the introduction of a digital era and electronic system, evidently there's going to be a rooting out of possible numbers that were inflated for obvious reasons.
You know, your data is only as good as, if it's correct, that's only when it helps you. If it's inflated, if it's wrong, it doesn't help you. But I really doubt that this figure is correct. 5 million is about 12% or 13% thereabouts of the entire Kenyan population. I mean, it's not possible.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see and hear what the results are by that. But the difference, and again, to just put this into context, the difference between what the government is paying and if this figure is inflated is a whopping 7 billion shillings. In terms of the amount of money the government budgets for students, it's 7 billion shillings. Should that 5.2 million students be ghost students, so to speak?
And Mike, I also just want to mention quickly on the 5 million missing pupils. It's a sign of a problem with the leadership. You know, the buck always stops somewhere. So I don't think the Ministry of Education should even be comfortable having such a big figure. It draws a lot of question marks towards their activities, how they're getting data, how, you know, when you say you want to collect data on all the students so that you're able to plan, it's just not possible.
It's not possible. 5.2.
It's too big a figure.
Let's wait and see how that is going to pan out, but at least we have the figures there and we'll work with those for now. On to page 4 of the Standard, we have a story there, fight over county cash snowballs into crisis. And thousands of workers set to go on strike next week as governors run out of cash to pay salaries. And just to put this into context and where it's coming from, we do remember the president not too long ago announcing and letting governors governors know that the amount of money that has already been budgeted for will not be added. There was a row between the National Assembly and Senate in terms of the amounts. But now this is going to bite hard if the strike goes on, particularly in the health sector. And this, of course, is going to be most painful for Wanjiko, Atieno, basically the Mwananchi on the ground. Joe?
Actually, what is happening with our counties is what we can say, it's about the wage bill as a country. It's not about just only our counties, but the whole nation. We have a problem with our wage bill. It is too high. We cannot sustain it. And the problem that we are facing again is the leaders that we have. Leaders who don't have clarity of issues to address the problems that are facing the common Mwananchi. This problem started during the budgeting process. It was not solved there. It ended up into being a fight of egos between the Senate and the National Assembly. Now it has gone to an extent, it's now the problem of Mwananchi, because people are going to go on strike. People cannot pay their rent, people cannot pay their transport. So it is a problem of common Mwananchi, and our leaders need to calm down and settle these issues.
Do you see it as an ego fight, or the fact that there are no resources? Because according to the president, we don't have money in the kitty. So what they're asking for is not possible to fund.
The problem is not that we don't have resources. We have limited resources, but our wage bill, it is too high, in the sense that balancing the resources in terms of paying the wage bill and doing development, it's becoming a problem. So we rather forget about development and focus on wage bill, or we do something with our wage bill to balance with our development.
All right, Vivian, what are your thoughts on what's happening in the counties?
I think number one, I don't think it's the president's prerogative to decide how much money goes to the counties. I think the Constitution is very clear about how we go about dividing revenue. So I don't think he can stand as president and say, you will not get.
I guess to be fair to him, there is also, he's backed by National Assembly who say there's no money. So it's not really him per se.
I disagree with the fact that there's no money. Number one, this whole stems from, like he said, from the budgeting process. And even when they're doing budgeting, they're using revenue from 5 years ago to decide allocation that goes to the counties. Already that's wrong, because 5 years ago is not the situation in Kenya right now. Populations have gone up, there's inflation, there's so many factors that have changed. We cannot be budgeting for 2019, 2020, using figures from 2014, 2015. It's the gap is just too wide. The needs have changed, population has grown, there's inflation. So number one, that's the first thing that should actually change in that entire process. Number two, even if the resources are limited, typically government doesn't avail all the funds needed in one go. It's done in phases. So I think it's wrong to say that we don't have money for this.
Okay. What would you say to the argument by the National Assembly that county governments have not been accountable even with the money that they have had so far, and as a result, that's why they're also saying you be accountable first before we can give you more?
I mean, agreed, there are very many loopholes into how county governments have been managing their resources, but the national government also has not helped. Case in point is the medical equipment that was allocated to the counties, and counties are paying 200 million every single, year? It's ridiculous. And most of the counties are not even able to actualize or get services from this medical equipment.
So do you think it's a valid argument that
I don't think it's a valid argument. I think both national government and county government need to be more accountable and need to be more effective in how they manage their resources. But that said, county governments still need more resources to be able to cater for the needs of the common Mwananchi. Yes.
All right, Joe, your thoughts on whether that's a valid argument? National Assembly have come out and said, hey, listen, county governments, what you're asking for, you've not accounted for yet. So to whom much is given, much is required. For us to give you more, we need you to account more.
That's not a valid point. Actually, the National Assembly has failed in its mandate as legislator, which is supposed to oversight even the national government. We are having wastage with the national government. The National Assembly cannot turn around and put that blame to the counties. It is actually the national government which is having wastage, and one of the reasons why counties are having problems with the health sector as a role which was devolved to the county, it is because the national government went ahead and leased equipment on behalf of the counties, and we are paying extra monies that we cannot be able to account for because of the policies that national government developed for the county government. So actually the cause of the problem in our counties originates from the national government, which the National Assembly is responsible of oversighting. Yes.
All right.
Actually, Mike, on this issue, I support Senate and I support the Council of Governors because no matter how big the loopholes are, currently, even leave alone the counties, even in national government, they're very weak structures in terms of holding leaders to account for money or resources that are lost. So you cannot blame the counties when even in national government, there's hemorrhage of resources happening. I don't think it's a valid reason. People still need services. We still need healthcare. We need education. You know, we need food security. And a lot of these things are already devolved to the counties. If you reduce the resources that the counties are getting, in essence, you're saying we don't care about the common mananchi.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what this boils down to, looking at this story, is if the health sector, for example, in the counties goes on strike, the nurses go on strike. We've seen this before. It is literally a matter of life and death. But maybe put into context, because I always like to think that there is a connection to the leaders that we have. The leadership that we have ends up with us here as a country. And as, you know, Wanjiko, we must come to a point where we are accountable and also realize that the leaders we put in place are the ones who lead us here. So your thoughts on, or your comments on the fact that this boils down to the kind of leadership that
definitely
we have, whether
does.
national or county government?
It definitely boils down to the kind of leadership that we have. The saddest thing, Mike, is that when you talk to, you know, when you go around and you talk to people, like just the common people, some of them don't even vote, they don't look at the leader. Some of them just look at Chama.
The Chama or the tribe.
I'm voting for this party or I'm voting for this person because he's my tribesmate, and it's really wrong. I think IBC and any other organizations involved in civic education really need to start doing a lot more in terms of civic education to educate the masses on the kind of leaders that would actually represent us well and bring about development much earlier, even before like the election, and not try and rush and compress, you know, civic education in 3 months or just a few months before a general election. Because what happens is now this culture of handouts, it ends up affecting the kind of people we have in parliament legislating on our behalf. And like he said, they've actually failed in their mandates of holding the national government accountable.
To account.
Yeah.
All right, Joe?
Yes, this is a consequences of electing certain leaders into position. For example, the county of Mombasa and the county of Nairobi. These are big cities in this country, but you can see the leadership in those two counties. One, it is led by a male version of a slave queen who is outside the country when his county is facing problems with vigilantes are killing people everywhere. Another county is led by a governor who is busy campaigning from left, right, and center in the country instead of focusing on the issues that are affecting the Nairobians. So these are consequences of our elections. And one thing that Kenyans need to understand is that democracy process does not start and end with the election. Democracy process starts from identifying leaders, electing them into position, and holding them into account. How do you hold a leader into account? It is during this time and period when we as a country are facing problems that need leaders to offer solutions.
To what we have.
Yeah.
All right, so definitely leadership affecting us as a country, but let's wait and see whether that standoff is going to be cleared, because then we are staring at very, very scary times ahead. On to page 6, and this is another story that it starts on the headlines. Bamburi, 3-hour ordeal with a terror gang. And for the benefit of anybody who might not know what this story is about, as we review it, it's in the Standard. But there was a gang that was terrorizing people in Bamburi. This was on Monday night, and for a period of 3 good hours with no police interventions, no authorities coming through. And finally, they came through 3 hours later, but this is after the gang had left. So this leaves so many questions, starting with the fact that how did this gang get themselves together? They seem to be organized. It was a calculated attack that started off with looting and literally injuring Kenyans. Then secondly is the question of security. But let me start with you, Vivian, on some of the concerns that you'd raise from this particular story.
For me, I think the first thing is what it calls to question our intelligence services. How can 30 people, that's a big number, move into one place and start, attacking people from 8 p.m. 8 p.m. is not late. I mean, for a cosmopolitan city like Mombasa, which is also...
Actually, 8 p.m. you still have people up and about.
Yeah, which is also a big tourist, location for Kenya. How is it possible that security services had no clue that something like this was in the offing? Or fine, even give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they went there and nobody knew. 3 hours. It reminds me of Garissa, actually. And it feels like then in this country, people can just come, do anything they want, and move out. But for Mombasa, I mean, such a big city, a tourist city with many tourists, and security being one of the major concerns in the county of Mombasa and in Mombasa, the city itself. This is very, it
leaves a lot
of questions to be asked. I wonder, I'd really be interested to hear what the IG of police will have to say about this. But the sad thing about this country is even after incidences like this, you see no indictments, no consequence. We are very laissez-faire in how we do things, even if you don't do your job, it's fine. We'll just give a press statement and life goes on. And yet people's lives have been affected. Very
unfortunate. Joe, your thoughts on this? And of course, the questions that are raised from this are many.
From where I come from, you wonder why at times people cheer and support the DCI led by our brother Kinoti. Sometimes when we criticize people who hold certain position, it is because we want them to do better. And I remember sometimes back when people were bashing Kinoti, some people were like, people are bashing Kinoti because they don't want his office to work. And you can clearly see, we need to bash him. We need to tell him that whatever is happening in this country, it is wrong. Because how do you explain that in this era of today, a gang of 30 people can attack an estate and do whatever they want to do on common mwananchi, and there's nothing happening? You see, these are the problems. But basically, the problems that Mombasa is facing are socio-economic problems, which need a different angle in terms of addressing them. Because the problems that Mombasa is facing are quite different in terms of the nitty-gritty, like the problems that we are having along the Kerio Valley of cattle rustling. But these are our unique problems, which we must have a unique way of solving them. Yeah.
All right, Vivian, you talked about intelligence, and one problem that maybe we have sometimes as a country is the fact that we isolate and take this as one case. However, the issue of gangs is not something new to Kenya. It's something that we have had before. We have the likes of Mungiki, we have some in Isli that we have had before in West Pokot. So gangs are not a new thing to Kenya. But do you think maybe we need to get to a point where the police or the intelligence service needs to pour and put resources towards just dismantling and finding out how these gangs work?
Absolutely. And the issue of gangs stems from youth unemployment, maybe things like drugs and drug abuse. And these are things that are an effect of, a result of not having economic opportunities that are viable enough for the youth to take up. But the other question, Mike, is in this entire area, I mean, we're talking Lakeview, Kisauni, it's a big area, Nyali. There was no police post, no police, anything, police on patrol, nothing. Because for 3 hours, I cannot fathom how a gang can terrorize and take over an entire area, not a small area, because this is big. Kisauni, when you go Nyali, it's an entire, region. With hotels also.
With hotels. And according to the story, people were actually trying to get in touch with the police. They were calling the police, but there was no response. But something else that is suspect is the fact that the police came after the gang had left. So that leaves very many questions.
I dare even say maybe there are insiders who maybe were aware. You know how sometimes there are these collaborations between gangs and some police officers? I would be very, very surprised if I was told that in this particular case,
no police are involved.
No police were involved.
Joe, do you think that's a case that maybe that needs to be followed up in terms of insiders being there?
Yeah, it's a case that needs to be followed up for the simple reason, as my sister has raised, that there's no way a gang of 30 people can terrorize a whole sub-county for 3 hours, and the police are not aware of such an incident. But basically, the problems that the people of Mombasa are facing are socio-economic problems which need a different angle in terms of addressing them. It's not a matter of just security, beefing up security, but it's a matter of solving the problem of unemployment in Mombasa. Because stories coming from Mombasa, they tell you that these gang groups start as football teams. Then they end up...
They metamorphosize to something else. But like Vivian Tarr mentioned, one of the issues, of course, is unemployment and the fact that they are trying to earn a living. And maybe just to mention that later on, we're going to be having newsroom, and one of the things we're going to be talking about is investigative journalism and why there should be more resources poured towards this, because maybe members of the Fourth Estate can also play a huge role here in ensuring that we find out how do these gangs come up, what really drives these gangs, who are the leaders for these gangs, because at the end of the day, they must be having leaders. But moving away from that, page 8, and I'd like to, there's a story there, cancer machines that remained idle for years. If we look at that and combine it with a story that we talked about not too long ago in terms of resources not being available to counties, and as a result, we have a looming strike threat that's coming up. But this particular story, apparently, cancer treatment machines worth 280 million Kenyan shillings lying in Kisumu, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Teaching and Referral Hospital that have not been used. And this is because, one, they do not have manpower. In fact, where we are, according to this story, is that those machines now are almost, well, they need, to be checked as to whether they can still work and their software updated. But Vivian, looking at the kind of waste that sometimes we have in county governments, here we are on one page saying that there is no money available to be given to counties. Then on the next, here we look at a machine worth 280 million Kenyan shillings that was bought but lying idle.
But you see, Mike, 1999, we still didn't have county governments. So county government cannot take responsibility for this. This is 20 years ago. Yeah?
Yes.
20 years ago. So we still had, I think, the municipal councils at that time.
But still, here you are, even after county governments have come. We've now had county governments since 2010. And that machine has still been there. So really, either they should have used it, disposed it, done something with it.
Definitely they should have. But I'm just saying, you cannot, the current county government cannot take responsibility for something they did not participate in its procurement or purchase, or, like they are not the ones who procured these machines. But that said, it still means to provide healthcare, especially now that cancer is such a big deal in Kenya right now. If it was an issue of training staff to handle or getting people to be able to handle these machines, I think these are some of the softer issues that maybe counties can try and use. But with machines, sometimes they become aged, like they are passed by time and technology, because technology and innovation is improving like every single day. So maybe that's an issue that
needs to be checked.
That could be one of the reasons why the machines have been idle for a long time.
All right.
To me, it trickles down to leadership. It trickles down to our problem as a country, where we rush to do certain projects, not because they are viable to the problems that we have, but because of tenders, because of procurement, as a result of deals. Yes, because if you go to purchase a machine, you must be able to understand that this machine needs somebody to operate it. This machine needs software that it's supposed to use to run, and for what period can this machine operate, and what are the critical problems that this machine is going to solve. So if by 1999, we did not have such issues, and we were able to purchase such a machine that up to date it's not being used, then you understand a problem in this country about tenders and deals.
So it boils down to corruption, basically.
Well, impunity, I'm telling you, at its highest order. And looking at the Daily Nation, we've just come from saying that counties do not have money, and as a result, we have a strike that is being threatened. But we move on to the Daily Nation. Scandal of members of parliament on a gravy train to US. Now, this particular story, we have 85 legislators who are going to the US, and they are going to attend conference, but Kenya, by all means and standards, is sending the biggest delegation. The country that is next to Kenya in terms of numbers is Nigeria, which is sending 25, but Kenya is sending a whopping 85 legislators. And we know that we've had trips of benchmarking and stuff like that. Joe, again, just the cost of a flight alone is $500,000 for each of these people traveling if they go on business class. But this, of course, leaves us wondering, when we say we have no money, is it that we don't have money, or is it our priorities are completely wrong and our leaders are taking advantage?
Our priorities are completely wrong, and our leaders are taking us for a ride, which is helping them. Actually, this is the simple reason. And when you ask...
More like a flight instead of a ride in this case.
If you ask these leaders, why are we having the problem to do with youth unemployment? They will tell you that youth need to be creative and create jobs for themselves and stop being job seekers. But you can see the allowances that somebody is earning in a day, 65,000 for a trip to go and sample country music.
And just look at the daily allowances. You have 72,000 for the Speaker of the National Assembly, 65,000 for MPs, 30,000 is the cost of each hotel per night. Then you have 46,200 daily subsistence allowance for members of... I mean, by the time they're done with this trip, they've earned a salary for a Kenyan who's worked for maybe 3 months.
I know, right?
And this reminds us, this reminds us of another story where our legislator went for a benchmarking. Was it in Egypt or some country? When they came back, they were supposed to issue a report. What they did, they went back to the library, copy-pasted a certain report, and gave us that report.
Brought us that report.
It really boils down to leadership. Most of these people, majority of the people who are elected, both in the National Assembly, Senate, the county assemblies, most of them, I don't think they really have the people's needs at heart. Because if you did, we would not be seeing this. This speaks of greed. A lot of the times, it's not wrong to go for a benchmarking trip, but can we see a significant change? You know, when you come back, what do you do for your people? What have you learned that you can come and implement here? What partners can you bring on board? We rarely see that.
And I think this even throws egg in the face of the president, because not too long ago, he did mention that part of the austerity measures that we have as a country is to cut down on foreign trips and foreign travel. Then this happens. So one wonders, are they speaking from the same page, or are we reading from different scripts?
So Mike, I want to take you back to, so imagine this trip, and our county governments are still being told there's no money. But there's money to go for a country music benchmarking trip. This is crazy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, Kenya has the highest number of delegates who are going, and if you'd like to get more details of that particular story, it's the headline of the Daily Nation today.
It says the county executive spent a staggering 267 million. I think this was in foreign travel. This is according to the Auditor General's report. So 267 million.
267 million.
In trips.
In trips.
And county governments in total, the 47 counties, we're asking for how much? 370 something billion, right?
Correct. Well, it is a huge amount, but I'm sure if we put stops to corruption and trips like this, then certainly the country would have money. Page 6 of the Daily Nation. Today is 7th of August, a day that many Kenyans remember because this is the day that there was a bomb blast in town. And despite the fact that it's been such a long time, we still have people trying to get compensation and seeking compensation, and U.S. reiterates support in fighting terrorism. Of course, a conversation that needs to be had consistently because terrorism is not a local thing, it is a global problem. But also a cause for concern is the fact that compensation has still not been dispensed to some of the victims. Vivian?
When we speak about terrorism, the one thing I want to highlight is even as we seek to curb terrorism and, put it to a stop, we must end extrajudicial killings. This thing of just stereotyping, a certain group of people, maybe because you're Somali, and then having extrajudicial killings, it's wrong. It needs to stop. In counties like Garissa and the counties neighboring, Somalia, they really get a lot of these cases. So I get that it's a security concern and it needs to be dealt with, but can we find a way to stop harassing Kenyans of maybe Somali descent and put a complete stop to extrajudicial killings? Yeah, I think I really needed to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, but what is coming out from this story is an issue about compensation, which I don't understand from 1998 up to today.
Why that has
why
not been
some
actioned.
families have not been compensated. It's an issue that it's supposed to be addressed, and it's something to me I think it's a logistical problem, but we need to address it because it's since 1998 up to today. It's quite a time that we need to compensate this family and find a way on how, instead of escalating the problem to continue, we stop it. But the way as a nation we are tackling the issue to do with the terrorism and to buttress my sister's point, you see, the issue about stereotyping certain people and using that to kill and do certain things, it is not good as a country. We are a country of rule of law, and we must abide by it.
All right.
Yes.
And I want us to conclude with a story that's on page 10 of the Standard. Going back to the Standard, Supreme Court upholds Waigoro's election. This has been a long-going battle between the governor and Mombi Kamodho, now formerly Anne Waigoro, with the Martha Karua. But this now has been upheld, and I guess that puts that to rest. Maybe just briefly to comment on that, Joe Halende.
Yes, it's now time for Waiguru to settle down and assist the people of her county to sort out the issue. Now there's no court battles, there's no excuse that she's running up and down. She needs to go back and do work for the people of our county, Kirinyaga County, and to our sister, Martha Karua. It's time now to support Waiguru and see that the county of Kirinyaga works well.
Absolutely. Vivian,
for me, I'm glad the court issues are finally over. And congratulations to Governor Mumbi Waiganjo. Kamodho, sorry. And yes, I think she should now get support from her opponent. Women leaders have been known to, reach across the political divide and be able to work together to bring about...
for the benefit of the people.
For the benefit of the people. They're very, people and service-oriented. And, of course, a good example is, the Embrace movement, who are made up of women across the political divide. They're working together to, just make sure that we are moving forward together. Yes.
All right. Well, we'll wind up the newspaper review right there. Thank you very much, Jo Halende and Vivian Ta, for joining us this morning just to review the dailies. And we're going to take a short break. It's 8 minutes after 7. When we come back, it's time for us to get into the newsroom. And today we'll be looking at investigative journalism. And we've had a lot in that particular area and possibly would like to find out what more can be done. So we're going to take a short break, but do stay with us.